Hello BookTube. In the early days of this channel, I done a where to start with like Australian books pretty much. And because February the 11th or 13th or whatever is my first year anniversary on BookTube, I thought I would redo that old awful video and do an entire new series called AusLit 101 where I have 16 different categories of um, non-fiction, fiction, like literally everything, and break them down and give you some lovely recommendations on where to start with these certain areas in Australian books, pretty much. So pretty much there's 16 different categories that we're going to be going through. I don't know when these going to be uploaded or whatever. Like there's no date or time. But pretty much I want to get to all of these. So we're going to start with today. We're going to be talking about overall history recommendations of Australian books. Then we're going to go to the First Fleet. We're going to talk about the Explorers. Then the Gold Rush. Eureka Stockade's going to be after that. And then we're going to go to Bushrangers, Federation, some general politics recommendations, World War One and World War Two, and that's where non-fiction's going to end. Then we're going to go to children's books. I'm going to chuck in some picture books there too, middle grade, YA, classic novels, modern novels, and then we're going to end with the intimidating verse and poetry because there's so much of that here, and I can't wait to get to that too. So this is what I'm going to be doing, and so let's start. So overall histories of Australia, where should you start? I have a couple you could go with. The first one that I would recommend is a concise history of Australia. And I don't own a copy of some of these, but I do have a photo of them. So if you want to look out for them, here it is. And so here it is by Stuart Macintyre here. This is probably the best single one volume of Australia you're going to find. It's very straight to the point. It's accessible, some lovely notes, and it's just straight ahead. And for me, it's probably my favorite one volume of Australian history. And so that's probably the first book I'd say start with. But then obviously we got to talk about the Indigenous pre-European settlement of Australia. And there's so many books I could have chose. I could have chose a Keith Windshuttle, even though I don't really like him that much. But I had to pick a book that's slowly becoming a modern classic, and for me, that's easily Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe. This is easily the most popular book on Australian Indigenous history. It's probably like 12 years old by now. And pretty much it points out evidence on how Indigenous people advanced in technology, whether it was like agriculture or like hunting and gathering. And it just, it's so confrontational in terms of the way it talks about Indigenous history. It's very fresh, and I feel like it's going to really stick as a modern classic when it comes to Indigenous history and just really talking about misconceptions of that time period too. And I feel like if you're gonna start with the one book about Indigenous Australians, try Dark Emu because you'll see it literally everywhere. And that's probably the main book I'd say. Again, I'm gonna cut these short because I only can do so many, but as like a beginner thing. But if you have any other recommendations, please let me know because I can't get to all of them in one video. And so that's like the first two that I would say stick with. But I feel like it's important to talk about the grandfather of Australian history, the Edward Gibbon of Australian history, and that is Manning Clark. He wrote in the mid 50s what was it meant to be? It was meant to be like a 2-volume set of Australia's history, but it mutated into like 6 different volumes. And it's incredible, to be honest. I know Manning Clark, I don't think he's taught in unis as much anymore because he doesn't really talk about Indigenous like time periods at all. I think that's more of the time he was writing in, but he's one of those rare historians that did look back and kind of regret as he got older that he didn't research that time period more when he wrote the early volumes of this book. But Clark's writing, he's just so lyrical and grand. and just actually really readable at the same time. It's very much more narrative focused nonfiction than it is facts and just, you know, this happened and then this happened and this caused this or whatever. Manning Clark is very story driven. Some people find him dry. Personally, I don't really at all. And I think if you want to do like more of a classic book on Australian history, I think obviously go to Manning Clark because he's where it all started pretty much. This is a good chance to talk about because I never talk about Manning Clark, but the only way you can really find him anymore is in abridgments like this. Even though I just said there was 6 volumes, I don't think he's ever really had like a trade paperback accessible release since the 50s when they first came out in hardcover because they are randomly so expensive for some reason. And I feel like I just want to address that and manifest that there will be a full release one day of his complete history of Australia instead of just sticking to a bridge. But he talks about every event leading up to 1935. So he kind of ends in the 30s. So 20 years before he started writing this. But yeah, so check out Manning Clark. People think he's dry, but I actually kind of like him. And so I have that. And then the last thing I'm going to recommend, it's a big undertaking, but it's by Thomas Keneally, and I have all of them here. And it's his big, massive 3-volume set, Australianers. And so what he talks about here is the origins of Australia. This does include a great couple chapters about Indigenous culture. It's incredible. So here's Origins to Eureka Stockade. And then the second volume is Eureka to the Diggers. Yeah. So pretty much World War One. And then the last volume goes from Flappers, so the end of World War One, pretty much to the Vietnam War. So that's another lovely start if you want more of like a time commitment, obviously. They're really readable. Thomas Keneally, he mostly does fiction, which I always thought he just done non-fiction until I read his fiction. I was like, oh my god, I think I know he wrote fiction because he's one of those authors where I just kind of assumed he just wrote non-fiction because I was only exposed to his non-fiction reading him. But that is a quick overall history of Australia. Where do you want to start? Again, if you have any more recommendations, drop them in the comments. I could keep on going. But next video will be on the First Fleet. And trust me, there is going to be a lot of recommendations on that because it is such an interesting time period to talk about. But yeah, thank you so much for watching BookTube, and I will see you next time.